you, everybody. Good morning. Welcome to the virtual conference world. Thanks for your patience, and we're so grateful to be here with you all today. We will be talking as Black women who lead STEM nonprofits and sharing with you a variety of information, everything from our personal and professional stories to what it means to foster familial kinship and belonging, to make sure that Black girls are included and invited in STEM. And then also we'll close out with a few strategies for exposing Black girls to the active practice of hard science and mathematics content. And so you have a wonderful panel here. I am Brittany Brady. I'm the Chief Executive Officer of the National Alliance for Partnerships and Equity. And we're actually going to start out with the thing that brought us all here, which is our ancestors. And so we'll start with which ancestors inspired us to live out our wildest dreams. And so we're going to start with Dr. Denise Strickland. Go ahead, Denise.
Thank you, Brittany. Good morning, everybody. I am Denise Strickland, and I am the Executive Director of Design Connect Create. And I was raised in a small college town in Arkansas by a mother and a father, both of whom were educators who firmly believed that knowledge is power, and perhaps one of the most important keys to successful living. My parents were products of sharecroppers, and they chopped cotton every day after school hours. And they attended all Black schools and universities because their schools were segregated at the time. And so they were either the first Black and or only Black teachers in their schools. My mother was the only Black female teacher at my elementary school. And my father was the only Black instructor in the Department of Education at my university, which was Arkansas State University. And so he, along with 3 other Black men, actually integrated ASU as the first African-American instructors in the entire university. And so my parents' dream was for all of their children to have access to the same educational opportunities as white children. And they did not want us to be exposed to or have to deal with the same racist or classist encounters that they experienced. And so as a result, they worked really hard to maintain a safe and nurturing environment for us at home. And they taught us the value of free education. And they constantly reminded us that if we worked hard and did not accept the status quo, that we could and we would achieve great things.
Thank you, Denise. And Denise and my story intersect. Denise is the eldest on the panel, and I'm the youngest on the panel. And both of us had grandparents who were sharecroppers, which lets us know that the more things change, the more they stay the same, and that progress is happening, but that it takes a while. And so I am here in the honor of my grandparents who were farmers on both sides. My mother and father were high school sweethearts, and they grew up in a one-stoplight town in rural Virginia. And as the children of sharecroppers, they understood the importance of education. When you don't own your own land, you are reliant upon the benevolence of others. And so they wanted to make sure that their children never had to worry about that. And so my grandparents instilled a strong sense of passion for education and a strong sense of justice and equity in all of their children. And so both of my parents were first-generation college students who were really able to pave their own way in this world. My mother would have been scientist had she grown up in a different moment in time. And because of her, I want to make sure that whoever would want to be a scientist will have access to do so. And so I am here living out my grandparents' wildest dreams, from the STEM environment of the farm all the way to here now as the leader of a national organization that increases access. I know that I am living in their light and in their shadow in many ways. So Tony, you want to share more about what brings you?
So I'm Tony Harrison Kelly. I am the Executive Director of the Bud Center at Southern Methodist University. I am so excited to be here and to represent my mama, who was very much a STEM champion way back when. I am first generation college, so first generation in my entire family to attend a university and to graduate, which is still amazing since it's 2022 and we're still having first generation graduates. But my mama made sure she enrolled me in coding classes in 1986. So just think about the sacrifice and the ways that she had to think in such different modes to be able to have the foresight to know that STEM was a big deal, that I had an aptitude for it, and to push me. So I am excited and I'm standing on her shoulders today. Saki, what's your story?
Well, I am so excited to be here, and thank you. Shout out to Trisha Berry, everybody. Uh, Winnie Blacknell, she is my grandma, and my grandmother did not have an 8th grade education. She was a maid and a nanny for most of her life until she was able to start her own beauty shop in East Lubbock, where I grew up. Even though she didn't have an 8th grade education, my grandmother was the best mathematician I ever knew. I remember she would take us to the bank and she would do the math in her head really fast. She counted every coin. She was just an amazing woman when it came to numbers, and really was the first person that, I said, oh, I want to be like that. I want to be good like that with numbers. So I really owe my grandmother everything when it comes to my drive and my passion and my interest in STEM. She was the ancestor that really opened me up to the possibilities and really emphasized education. But she also emphasized kindness and meekness and humility. She was an absolute saint. And I think over the course of STEM, that's what I try to bring to the space, not just the content and everything like that, but also these qualities that my grandmother instilled in me, given that she was a mathematician, but she was just an amazing human being. So that's my story. I'm gonna kick it over to who's next. Who we got next? Is it Shane?
It's me, but before we come to me, we're going to make sure we honor the founder and executive director of the GEMS camp, which is Saki, who also is the one who made sure we all had our shirts, and you can get that on her website. So my name is Shane Woods. I am the executive director for Girl Start, which is headquartered in Austin. I am in my 6th month of being in this amazing role and loving it. Like many that you've heard, my nearest ancestor that has inspired me is my grandfather. He was one of those an early STEM initiative ambassadors in terms of he was the woodshop teacher. But he also allowed us to know as his grandchildren that education really is the key to opening up possibilities. He had a bachelor's from Prairie View A&M as well as a master's from Southeastern Arkansas. And so if he could have navigated the barriers that Dr. Strickland mentioned in terms of being the first, being the only, walking as a Black male in spaces that were not friendly to him, I knew that I could do it, and there was no excuse he was going to take for it. So it was one of those things that we knew going to school was important, and utilizing the brains that we were given in that space and showing up and being as big as we are. But he also was side by side with me when I was in 6th grade and realized the kids across the way were doing some amazing GT work, and my teacher had told me that that was not for me. And so he made sure I sat up and got a meeting with the counselor. And when we got into that counselor's office, he turned it over to me and he said, Shane Nicole, this is your meeting. And so that is how I knew that having ancestors and adults walking with you is important. And that's what we all need to do for Black girls, to make sure that they're heard, they're seen, and given an audience. Your turn, Jennifer.
I love that. I mean, all of the stories have just centered on where we come from. And each of us walks into the room not by ourselves, but we bring with us our 10,000 ancestors that stand behind us. And I am Dr. Jennifer Stimson. I am the Chief Program Officer for the TD Jakes Foundation. I am also very young on my job. I'm about 4 months into this role. And in my space, I am to inspire the next generation of girls. And my story begins with my father, not too distant away. My father was the first Black pharmacist to work for a corporation here in Dallas. And what I learned from him was just so much. He had to fight through so many barriers just to get to where he was. Both he and my mom were the youngest children, and they were the first in their families to go to college. So in my DNA is that drive to keep going, to keep moving forward. And the thing about my father owning his own pharmacy, first of all, he was a Black man who owned a compounding pharmacy in Dallas. And so there were so many things that were closed to him, but he never let go of that. And what he instilled in both me and my sister was that even though there's a door that's closed, you get to design the building and open a door for you. And even if the door might not be as magical as the other doors that have been opened, it's the door that you have created to open for yourself because you're responsible for your journey. And what I learned from him is the power of science through medicine. As a pharmacist, he taught me how to give back to society through medicine. Oftentimes, Black Americans who live in under-resourced communities just don't have health access that is adequate. And so what his responsibility was just not to provide people with medicine, but to teach people how the medicine works in their bodies to help them heal. Because when you have knowledge, then you have power. And with that power, he was able to transform the lives of all the people who came into his pharmacy. They actually stopped coming to get their prescriptions, but they started continuing to come to get life lessons, because he wanted to make sure that generations later, there were not people who were not just sick in their bodies and sick in the mind, but they were passing on wealth and knowledge to be healthy. And that's what I take with me from what I learned from him into the spaces that I inspire Black girls, is that wherever you come from, you have a responsibility to grow your knowledge. And when you have that knowledge, you have the power to keep going. Brittany, I turn it over to you.
Absolutely wonderful. And we all believe that knowledge is power. I think that's the continuous thread. That is something that was instilled in all of us from our ancestors. And Jen, you had such a unique experience for your father to be within the sector. What I want to pose to the group is, as Black women who are also former K-12 students, all of us went throughout the public school system, what experience can you share about how you knew STEM was for you as a Black girl?
I think it's pretty amazing that I went through 23 years of formal schooling, and I counted. I had 2 Black teachers in 23 years of formal education. And so we know how much representation matters. We know how important it is to have students and teachers have that cultural match where they are similar and there's a shared background. So I had my one Black teacher in elementary, her name was Ruby Williams, and she made sure that we actually got to try STEM. So all the rest of the teachers were all about vocabulary and all the kind of more academic and boring sides of STEM, but she let us touch things and break things and take things apart. She took us to go see airplanes in person in Sherman, Texas, where there aren't really airports. So it was a big deal to have those real life experiences. And I think what I am wanting to highlight is the power of one teacher. That one teacher helped me set mindsets for inquiry and really think deeply, and really kind of her seeds have carried on till now. And then also the power of hands-on experiences. Even though I did not see myself in STEM growing up, I had this curiosity and this joy about learning from these seeds that really has kind of blossomed throughout my career. So just the importance of the power of one teacher, and also those hands-on experiences for all girls, and especially Black girls.
And when it comes to knowing that STEM was for me, mine actually, interestingly, started somewhat outside the class and out of school time, which is wonderful that that's where I actually operate now. In terms of, I'm going to really date myself, I really enjoyed watching Mr. Wizard. And he would come on and he had those kids that looked like the kids in our neighborhoods, to be very honest. And he was asking questions, and they were curious, and they were doing it with things that looked like they were around the house. But it was those amazing concepts and cross-cutting themes that I was like, I can do these things. I'm curious. I am from the 80s. We went outside and we were outside exploring, legal and illegal. But it's one of those things that we were able to figure out our world and make connections. So that way, when teachers asked about photosynthesis, I could be like, yes, I know about that. Asking about metamorphosis, yes, I've seen that. So it's one of those things that I was able to attach experiences through Mr. Wizard and all of those things. But when that annual opportunity at Dillingham Intermediate School in Sherman, Texas, said that there was an invention convention, I was like, I'm gonna do that. And I remember my teacher was like, I don't know if you'll have time or if that's really for you. So when I won it, I made sure that she saw that certificate of what I could do. And she was still like, but I thought so-and-so entered her class pet. And so it's one of those things that the words that you say to a child matter. Now, I'm the one that I use it for fuel. And I was like, oh, you're going to see what I did with this certificate because I won. But it also allowed me to know that I can set a goal and I can achieve it. And then it gets me to that next level. So that way, it's one of those things that I felt very proud of myself. And I think that's something we need to teach girls, especially girls of color, to be proud of themselves, to say that, yes, we can be proud of you, but how do you feel? How did that make you feel to win Invention Convention? What do you think you can now do? What classes are you now going to enroll in? Because you know that thinking and imagineering and all of that is possible for you. So it's one of those things that being able to enroll in things like that, to be a part of contests outside of the classroom, to apply that knowledge and those things that we are learning and reading in a new way, it's really important.
So I'm going to take a different approach because I'm going to speak from being the Black teacher in the lives of so many students. My career has taken me up and down, but I recently worked in a place where I was the first Black teacher hired, and I was the first Black science teacher in that space. And so when you are a Black girl in science who happens to be responsible for the education of future scientists, and many of my students hail from families with names on buildings that we know, and recognizing that you have a responsibility of ensuring that their academic success leads them to the same academic success as those who attend public schools, I recognize that I really had a responsibility to carry out a legacy. And so I felt a sense of responsibility to the culture and to the profession. And so I did what exactly the two ladies who spoke before me, Dr. Tony and Shane, said, inspiring kids to be actively engaged in science. Because when you get to see it, this idea of role models is so powerful. And one thing I know about Black girls is that they don't need resources. They don't need the best school. They don't necessarily need all the fancy stuff. They need the best role models. And so when you have a role model, it doesn't matter where she comes from. That inspiration will carry them to the best places, because you become your best self by having someone affirm for you that you matter. You have a voice. And so in my teaching space, one of the questions is about what is your secret sauce, and that is resilience. Because when you are the first, when you are the only, you have a responsibility to carry that. You might hear me keep saying that word responsibility, because as a Black woman, our responsibility is not just to ourselves and to our family, it is to the broader sisterhood, because when we make it, everybody makes it. When we aren't successful, everybody knows it. And so our responsibility is to carry everything forward. And so in that role of being a mentor and being a sponsor and being a supporter in the spaces that I was in, I was able to make sure that kids could see themselves. And no matter if they looked like me or if they looked up to me, they saw themselves in the future and promise of science. And that, as an educator, is my responsibility. Brittany, I turn it back over to you.
Fantastic. And we're moving forward into strategies, but you all just heard quite a few role models, sense of belonging, not doing what Shane's teacher did, right? We've learned things to do and things not to do. And so I want to push us into what meaningful and sustainable strategies can STEM practitioners and educators do to expose Black girls to rigorous experiences. We talked about those hands-on experiences for Dr. Tony Harris and Kelly to be able to break things and get into things. Shane also shared something similar, but what can we leave attendees with to know that they can give Black girls access to rigorous experiences and active practice with STEM subjects? You want to get us started, Saki?
Yeah, sure. I think this is such an important question, because if you're on this call, right, if you're at this conference, this is something that you care about. This is something you're obviously invested in. And it's something that, it needs to be top of mind, right? Because most of our audiences, if you're in the state of Texas, chances are the children that you're serving are going to be from minoritized populations, whether that's, Latinas or Black students. Like that is a lot of who we serve and who we're here for. So we need to be very aware of that. From childhood to adulthood, I've seen disparities being, a student in more of a fluent type of school, and then being a student in, like my neighborhood school, and then going to UT Austin and kind of, being a math major, being very isolated, and then working in at Texas Instruments, so all of these different experiences has really informed me of what it's like to have this kind of underrepresentation, that you have to operate in and that you have to thrive in. So when I think about strategies that I use at the GEMS camp, which we do center Black, and Latina girls primarily, is you have to be holistic. Like you have to be authentic, even if you're not from, our background. Anybody can do this. You have to lead with authenticity of who you are, and you have to demonstrate that you are there for them. And it is a learning curve. You know, you can't come in with your own agenda, so to speak, even though we all have goals, initiatives that we're striving for within our organizations. But you really have to come in as a learner of their cultures, learning about their families, their backgrounds, their experiences, also understanding the unique factors that impact girls of color in particular out of STEM, right? Because there's a whole lot of systemic things that happen. So do your homework, understand that, and then build your framework of your program around that using more holistic strategies. So Brittany, that's what I would offer, and that's what I try to do. I'm not saying I'm perfect at it, but so far it's been working for us. And I think I'll toss it back over to you now. I'm not sure who's next.
Denise, you also have a nonprofit that does direct service work. You want to share about some strategies you've implemented?
Yeah, sure. So as you heard in my previous talk, I did not have a background in STEM. It just was not a thing. You know, I went to school in the 70s and 80s. I'm the senior of the group, and it wasn't a thing, but my background is education. And so a wise sister who is on the panel right now once said, I heard her say that STEM practitioners and educators should first acknowledge that STEM not only can be for everyone, it should be for everyone. And so in DCC, you know, we really, as it's already been said, we really make sure, and we are very intentional about the activities and the experiences that we present to the girls. And it has to be hands-on, you know, project-based. And the other intention is that they need to see, and they must see, females who look like them. And so as educators, we know that although the strategies and the concepts of teaching should not be the same for everyone, they cannot be the same for everyone. The expectation absolutely must be the same as it relates to academic success and achievement. So when our girls come to the camps, or we've started an after-school program now for the elementary girls, and we have a mentoring program as well. And so we try to meet them where they are, and it starts with knowledge and understanding where they're coming from. And so we just really believe girls should be exposed to females who have careers in STEM fields, and girls of color should have opportunities and experiences to learn from those role models, to learn from those females, and also be mentored by them in those STEM fields.
Yeah, mentorship, role models, and also giving access to experiences. I think my biggest strategy is to be a learner, like Saki said, but not just to be a learner, but to be a learner with an asset base, right? I always offer people the question, how are you asking your students what they want to learn? How are you engaging them? How are you asking them in what ways they're already a genius? If she can figure out how to braid beautiful patterns in hair, then she can figure out how to do geometry, right? If she can figure out how to rap a whole song, then she can count bars. She's a mathematician. And so how are you learning enough about cultural context to see the genius that's inherent in our cultural experiences? And so that's the strategy that anyone can access. It's a fun strategy. It's a way to really learn your students, and it's a way to learn more about the world that they come from, if it differs from your own. And 9 times out of 10, it probably does. I'm a Black woman, but I am from a predominantly affluent Black community. And so people presume that because I'm Black, I know every Black experience. Every woman on this panel comes from a different background. Blackness is not a monolith. Just because something works with the Shane does not mean that it will work with the Saki. And so learning people and adapting your practice to make sure that they're supported is critical and key. Relationships are everything. So you're not just learning to solve for them to have higher test scores. You're learning to support their trajectory and to support them being scientists, engineers, mathematicians, technologists, the geniuses that they are. And so we want to make sure that you all have a couple of moments to ask any questions that you have. We will close with one thing that those in the audience can do tomorrow to humanize the Black girls they serve, entered through STEM. Ladies, one word, my one word is see their humanity. That's not one word, but it's one thought. See humanity and humanize yourself. Anyone else want to throw one out?
My one word is expectation. Make sure you have it and that it's equal.
My one word is patience, because you're going to need it and the student's going to need it to get through the relationship to figure out what matters to them both.
My one word is curiosity. So having that same scientific approach to knowing your students. So carrying that inquiry-based framework for learning into relationships with your Black and brown students.
My one word would be empathy. Remember, the design cycle starts with empathy. You have to empathize with your audience, your customer, who you're solving the problem for. So think about that. We should have empathy, and that's my one word.
Mine would be sponsor. A lot of Black girls don't know that they can take those higher, more advanced math and science courses. They don't know that they have the aptitude to be in that AP, that dual credit. Their parents may not know about it. So sponsor them. And that means truly getting them to know that they need to go and take these classes, to try them, that you believe in them, that you know that they can do it, and to make sure that they have those steps to get there. So please sponsor them.
Please. And I'm going to include in the chat one more time in case people missed it. We do have a handout for you all to go in and read. We summarize through the course of this chat, but if you're intrigued more about our stories, please feel free to go and grab that handout from the Google Drive. And we're here for 15 more minutes, so ask your questions. There's no question that's off limits. We are all good friends. So by all means, oh, we have a question in the chat for Dr. Jennifer. Can you please give a shout for if-then resources and how to access diverse STEM role models? Yes, we have all diverse STEM role models right here. And
yes,
we have an if-then ambassador among
yes.
us.
So I am an if-then ambassador. And so one of the calls to action for the ambassadorship is to encourage girls to find a career in science that's definitely non-traditional. One of the things I really like about the ambassadorship is that we all know that science is just one word, but when we think about science and STEM, what if then does is break down what each career is. So I want to be an engineer. Well, which kind of engineer do you want to be? Do you want to be an electrical engineer? Do you want to be a chemical engineer? Do you want to be a design engineer? So that those individual letters in STEM actually become words of action. So you're not just one particular scientist. You can see a variety of different careers where science or STEM is actually involved. And what I really like about it is that these ambassadors who have the statues, with each statue, there's a QR code, and those QR codes highlight the careers that particular scientist has, but it also connects to real world science activities that are happening where that career shows up. So you want to be a large carnivore ecologist. Maybe you don't live in California, so you can't study bears, but if you live in Texas, maybe the largest carnivore that's in your area might be bobcats. And so you could learn about how ecology is affecting your neighborhood. And so what is very awesome is that the whole theme of role model and sponsorship, that is exactly what we are doing here on this panel. That's also what the if-then ambassadorship does. It provides role models, because I cannot say it enough. If they can see it, they can believe it for themselves, they can become it. And that's what that message is. And that's what Black girls need, is this constant reminder and affirmation that you can do it, and we got your back. I mean, we gonna make sure that you get to the next level.
Love it. Next question. How did you start and fund your nonprofits? We have a founder here. That's probably for you, Saki.
Yeah.
Great question.
Oh, you went back on mute somehow.
Sorry about that. I started my nonprofit as a classroom teacher. So shout out to the classroom teachers, right? Because yes, you can create, you can innovate, learn from your students. And literally that's what happened to me. Paying attention to my 7th grade girls, who I got the privilege to teach the 8th grade year, their algebra 1, is when I started noticing, wait a minute, they're acting differently. They're acting like they don't know what's up in this class. Like they're shrinking back. And that made me curious about what else could be true. And I started doing my own research. I was not in graduate school, nothing like that. I just started looking out what was out there, and there were people studying gender inequity and things like that. And it really sparked my curiosity as a teacher. And so I just went on this adventure to start a summer camp. That summer I went to the public library and I was like, hey, I want to do summer camp here. And they were like, okay, sure. And I just found some girls in the community. I'm making it sound easier than what it was, but literally it was just a coming together of people. I got another math teacher friend, and we just did like a little Saturday camp, and every year it has evolved. So I know I made that sound super easy, but really teachers, If you have an idea, if you have a passion for something, if you're observing something in your classroom, go for it. You know, check it out. Talk to people about it. You'll be surprised at who's willing to come alongside you to make that happen for you. So great question.
We have another aligned question that I'm going to answer for you, Saki. We have a question or I have an MBA and years of corporate experience. Can I start my nonprofit in STEM? Saki has an MBA. If you have the passion and you see the vision and you see the need, by all means, we need all the help that we can get. The gaps continue to persist, especially across gender and race. So if you have a passion for it, please, we need as many people at this table as possible to enhance access for students. Trisha has a question. Have you seen any changes in your approaches and or work with students since the pandemic? Confidence challenges, academic, different motivations, changes in participation. Yes, 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 yes. Self-efficacy is now the name of the game because in many ways, the pandemic really kind of dashed some students' self-esteem, especially our girls. A lot of girls were tasked with additional household chores that their boy counterparts or other gender counterparts were not. And so girls really took a hit. I know I've witnessed it in our times with training teachers and working with youth, and I imagine that other folks on this panel have seen that as well. And it frankly is going to take a lot of innovation and creativity for us to really make up for some of the gaps and lapses that we've experienced as a result of the pandemic, I would say. Anyone else have an answer to that one? Oh, we have questions coming on in.
Okay, Shane, what about you and Girl Start? I'm sure you've seen quite a bit. And Denise as well.
Yeah, Girl Start focuses mainly on 4th and 5th grade girls. We have after school club, and then summer we do ramp up to include middle school girls. And in my 6 months, it's one of those things that when I've had a chance to see the girls in action, it's kind of they're on each end of the spectrum in terms of they have everything to say. The manners have been put to the side, and you are going to get all of this knowledge that they have. And then you have those that really have shrunk. That time away, that pandemic, that isolation really has gotten them. They unfortunately have built a shell around themselves, and so you have to do more to get them involved. But I want to say that it's one of those things that we also have noticed that they all are amazing advocates for themselves, whether they're the silent one or the most boisterous one. They've learned to say what they want, what they need, and how to advocate for that. So it's one of those things that you have to, it's no longer to sit and just get students. It's the kids that you truly do have to engage with. It should be good, girl-led, youth-led activities. It has to be real world. They are not going to take, you just need to learn this right now. No, they want to know, how does it change the world? What is it going to do to change my local ecosystem? As well as then what is the career and who's done this before? And what does that look like? And that's why, yes, it is valuable to have mentors in front of 4th and 5th grade girls, because they need to know that it's worth it. It's worth getting up every day to go to this school to do this. So that way I can get there and to hear your stories and to hear your failures and to see that you persevere. So yes, this may be your 5th career. You may have had to take a break and then go back to school. They need to hear that in order to become an adult, it is a challenge, but it's worth it. And you're gonna learn from it. So it's one of those things of them hearing how you have done it, because they unfortunately think that we have magically made it to adulthood without any trials and tribulations. I'm telling you, they believe it. And so we've got to make sure that we are doing and making sure that they have a space, like the amazing If Then and Sally Wright have said, like they've got to see it to be it. And so that's what we must do, is put those mentors, get those volunteers, show up for those kids, so that way they know that it really is all of us rooting for them to be the next great generation.
Okay, we got the questions rolling in now, so we're going to get to as many as we possibly can. Next one was, when considering scaling these support programs for the younger age groups, do you find virtual mentorship to be effective, or are in-person mentorship programs the most effective way to go? I have a mixed answer on that, and so I welcome anybody else to answer. I always think in-person is great, but if proximity is the barrier, virtual works just as well. Anyone else want to weigh in on that?
I was going to say exactly the same thing, Brittany. So I got to teach through the pandemic. And so we started these virtual connections through this group called Bold Idea, where the STEM experts would Zoom in every week. And so I think that we are not taking advantage of the way the world has evolved since the pandemic. So there are tools out there to help get mentors in front of students. I think in person is best because that's the way humans really connect. But if you can't get them there, I think virtual is definitely the way to go. I've seen great responses from students with virtual mentors. Somebody asked that in the chat as well. So I think by any means necessary, do whatever you need to do to get STEM experts of color in front of students of color, especially.
And Design, Connect, Create, I'll answer that really quickly. We actually added a mentoring program in the middle of the pandemic. And so it was all virtual. And so we just started in person this year, and there has to be a hybrid because it's not the same. And so our mentoring program is for high school girls, and some of them like the in-person and some of them don't because they just don't have access to transportation or to be wherever they need to be to meet their mentors. So I think I agree with what Dr. Tony said. We do need to have both, and you don't need to not mentor simply because you don't have the in-person structure in place. Mentoring is needed no matter how you do it. And we had If Then ambassador mentors, and Dr. Jennifer was one of them, and it was all virtual. And the girls loved it. And they learned more about STEM opportunities virtually than they would have in person because these people were from different states. So I would say that we absolutely must find a way to mentor and do both hybrid and in person.
Love that. And this is a question that I think a lot of people will have, and I'm going to merge the two. How can teachers like myself who are not from an underrepresented group become a better mentor for students that are underrepresented in STEM? We have a similar question from a gentleman. What are some of the biggest recommendations you have from males working in spaces to empower girls and young women? Based on my experience, every couple of years, I notice some changes of things I have to be mindful of or the ways young students hear. First of all, Jeffrey, hope I'm pronouncing your name right. That's the first thing, is an awareness, right? I'm paying attention to what my students are what they're processing and how they're hearing it. And especially, you don't have to be from the exact same background to be able to identify and to be able to support a student. It's important to try to get them in front of people that share their background if you can, which shows an investment in their growth. But also, I had a teacher, a white male, who had a mohawk, and he was so invested in Black girls that is actually who they went to on my middle school campus. They went to Mr. Thomas because Mr. Thomas showed that he cared. People respond, especially young people respond to care and compassion and a true relationship and investment in their growth. And so that is the starting point. Regardless of where you come from, regardless of your background, if you are really invested in getting to know your students, then you can find out ways to support them along their trajectory. I want to make sure I open that up to everybody on the panel, though, because I imagine other people have similar questions, but you don't have to look like us to get us.
Absolutely. I get this question a lot too. Well, can I volunteer at the GEMS camp? Can I be on the staff? I'm white. And it's like, of course you can. Like, yeah, absolutely. I think the main thing, if you're not from, this, if this isn't you, the main thing is be authentic, right? Don't come in with a hidden agenda, trying to change everything, trying to conform, make kids conform, make kids assimilate. Like, just check yourself at the door, but you're welcome in the space. And all kids need all sorts of people. Like, we wouldn't be up here telling you, no, you can only be Black or you can only be brown. No, that's not what we're saying. That's definitely not the way to go, right? But just be authentic, find ways to connect, and try to introduce topics or projects that would be of interest to them, perhaps culturally. But again, that goes back to what we were talking about earlier, Brittany, about learning about people so that you can form those authentic connections.
I want to chime in really quickly and say that it's revolutionary to find your common ground and not focus so much on what's different, because, your race is different, but is there something that's in common that you have with kids? Maybe you guys both like broccoli. There's a common ground. Folks who come from different backgrounds often center their focus on what you can physically see. And that is what's limiting. So the fact that you're like, well, because I'm this race, can I help? Because I'm this gender, can I help? You absolutely can. And I think someone just said it, check yourself at the door. But if you focus so much on your difference, then you've lost the focus of what you've been called to do. Your passion is just the fact that you have passion and concern that you want to help. That's enough. Saki and Shane and Denise and Tony, if you call them and said, hey, I want to come up there on Tuesday and volunteer. Guess what they will say? What time are you coming on Tuesday? They're not going to ask you if you're white. They're not going to ask you if you're rich. They're going to ask you, what time are you going to show up? So all of you all who are listening, who come from different backgrounds, and you get to define that. Recognize that your revolution and change is just showing up. Who cares? No one cares about your background. They care about your effort and your passion to do good work. That's what's most important.
Your authenticity, absolutely. And I'm sorry, Robin, I don't think that we'll have time to answer your question in earnest about how do you deal with unsupportive, difficult family units. For example, the student is very passionate, but they aren't getting support from their families due to a number of reasons. I believe Saki and Shane answered that in the chat, and there's also a blog post in the chat from Dr. Tony Harrison Kelly. I want to be mindful of everyone's time and make sure that we don't try to rush through anything. That's one of the key learnings. So I want to remind us back to our original focus of the conversation. And you guys have all heard our stories at the beginning. We started with that with intention because it's important to hear stories, learn people, meet the human being, and embrace your own humanity. We're all in roles, we all do things, but it's a human that makes up all those roles. And so really embracing that person is a key part. And then the next part is about familial kinship and belonging. We all found that at some point throughout our trajectory. You might be the one that fosters that for a student. You don't have to look like them to foster it. All you have to do is see them, hear them, and support them authentically. And then lastly, implementing those strategies. If you're trying to figure it out and you're exploring, all of our emails are available. My organization does professional development. Dr. Tony Harrison Kelly is an evaluator. Dr. Stemp is in the programs of a foundation. We're all in the space and we're all here to support our girls. And we see Black girls as everybody's girls. All girls are my girls. I care about everybody's child, right? I believe all means all with me. You know how they say Texas, y'all means all? We mean that. And so any way that we can support the growth of everybody that's participating in this summit, we will be happy to. And we're very, very grateful to be able to share with you all today. So thank you for having us. We are grateful to be able to share our stories and so appreciative of you, Trisha, for your outstanding leadership. Trisha is working like 100 jobs, y'all. She's not going to tell you, but we will tell you. And she's still making this happen, and it's for access and for success. And so we're grateful for you, Trisha. Thank you for your leadership and your light.
Oh my goodness. Well, you're welcome, but thank you all. My staff was having a little side conversation. If we could listen to you all day, you all are so inspiring and your stories are so amazing. And the things that you're sharing and those practical things that everyone can take away and implement in our own world, in our own lives, in our own neighborhoods is so important. So thank you. Such an important conversation.